coming off an interview with a true 80s icon. His band was as big as anyone in 1982 and 1983. They actually pulled off something that not even the Beatles accomplished. Their debut record spent 15 weeks at #1, and they had 2 #1 hits and 4 top 10 hits. They won a Grammy, they were on the cover of Rolling Stone, they did everything. But by the mid-80s, they had completely disappeared. They never had another hit. Up next, we get the story behind all of these hits, and we find out what the hell happened. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you used to watch Friday night videos late into the night, and then you wake up early the next morning to catch Saturday morning cartoons, you're gonna love this channel of musical nostalgia. Make sure that you subscribe below to get some of the most unique stories of classic rock and pop, those who created the music straight from them. Click on the bell and all that good stuff. You can also get some new merch below. We have our Professor of Rock merch. We also have our Patreon where you can see even more content and be an honorary producer to help us this mission of curating music history. The link is below. So today's band, they were on top of the world from 1982 into 1983 as rookies. As rookies, their debut record spent 15 weeks at #1. They had 2 #1 hits in a row, and no rookie band had ever accomplished that, not even the Beatles. They also won a Grammy. They were on the cover of Rolling Stone back when that mattered. Their videos were all over MTV. And, you know, their next album after that did very well. It sold 3 million copies and it had 2 more top 10 hits. But you know what? By the mid-80s, the band was gone, extinct. They never had another hit. I'm always so fascinated with how a band can go scorched earth on the charts and, you know, blow up radio and MTV, and then a mere year or two later, disappear into the ether. If you haven't guessed it by now, I'm talking about the band Men at Work and their 6 times platinum juggernaut Business as Usual, and also their follow-up Cargo. They were competing with the biggest bands out there, the biggest artists out there in 82 and 83. They're holding their own in the charts against The Police and Michael Jackson. Their twin #1 singles, Who Can It Be Now and Down Under, I mean, they're still played today. And they defined the early 80s, especially, like I said, the iconic music videos. Well, today, we're going to talk with lead singer and songwriter Colin Hay about both of these hits, as well as the other 2 big hits that they had, It's a Mistake. It's a mistake. And Overkill. From Overkill. These were all massive hits, so what the hell happened? That's what I have to ask. Well, after their second album, Cargo, went to #3 and sold 3 million copies, the band toured the world. Then in 1984, tension began to rise in the band, especially between singer Colin Hay and drummer Jerry Spicer. Furthermore, the band moved on without Spicer and bassist John Reese. From there, Colin Hay, multi-instrumentalist Greg Ham, and guitarist Ron Streicher, they used studio musicians to record their 3rd album. It was called Two Hearts. That came out in 1985. Now, that album failed to gain any traction, critically or commercially. It only made number 50 on the album charts, and it didn't have any top 40 hits, even though 4 singles were released from the album, including Everything I Need and Man with Two Hearts. Everything I Need, I think, went to number 47. Barely missed out. It just didn't have the magic of the first 2 albums. Later in 85, the band played 3 songs for the Oz for Africa concert, and they were broadcast during the Live Aid telecast. And then saxophonist, flutist Greg Ham, he left the band, and by 1986, the band was really defunct and never had another hit with Colin Hay going after a solo career. So if you count it up, in 1983, on top of the world, by 1985, they couldn't smell a hit. It's crazy. Now, 10 years later, the band did reform to a point. Colin Hay and Greg Ham reformed using the band name. They toured South America. They released their first new studio track in a decade called The Longest Night. They toured some more under that band name, but then they would face a major obstacle. A lawsuit came out in 2010 when Larkin Music Publishing actually won a lawsuit they had brought against Hay, Stryker, their label Sony BMG, and their publishing company, EMI Songs Australia, for their alleged appropriation of the song Kookaburra. It was written clear back in 1932 by Marion Sinclair.
Kookaburra sits in the old gum tree, Mary, Mary, king of the bush is he.
Now, Larrikin happened to own the publishing rights to Kookaburra. They actually discovered the similarity of the Down Under flute line when in 2009 on an Australian music quiz show called Spicks and Specks, there was a question posed about the similarities of the song. In 2010, a judge ruled that Down Under did contain a flute riff based on Kookaburra, but he said he didn't feel it was the hook of the song or a substantial part. So the judge ultimately ruled that Larrikin should be paid 5% of past and future profits. The ruling, it devastated saxophonist flutist Greg Ham, who really felt responsible because he added the flute riff at the center of the lawsuit well after Stryker and Hay had written the song. This tragic result brought on heavy depression and anxiety. A short time later, Greg Ham actually suffered from a heart attack and passed away. The lawsuit ended up netting Larrikin about $100,000. But according to Colin Hay, legal fees in the case totaled about $4.5 million. Hay said after the judgment, and I quote, "I'll go to my grave knowing Down Under is an original piece of work. In over 20 years, no one noticed the reference to Kookaburra. Marion Sinclair never made any claim that we had appropriated any part of her song. And she was alive when Down Under was a hit. Apparently, she didn't notice it either." Now, Colin Hay has gone on to create an incredible solo career. And up next, we're going to cover the hits with him. He'll tell us the stories and where he is now and some of his solo stuff. You know, it's funny that Down Under was originally played on a bunch of Coke bottles, which he'll tell us about. It was actually the song that introduced me and so many 80s kids to Australian culture, you know, with lyrics about a fried out combi, which means a broken down bus, which I found out later.
Traveling in a fried out combi.
Also, the head full of zombie. Zombie was a strong batch of marijuana that was, you know, floating around Australia that a lot of people called zombie grass.
On a hippie trail, head full of zombie.
And of course, the Vegemite sandwich, fermented yeast spread that Australians love on their toast. And you know what? Not a fan of Vegemite.
He just smiled and gave me a Vegemite sandwich. And he said,
I've had it. I had it because of the song and not for my taste buds. And then there's the famous part about where beer does flow in Manchunder.
He does flow in Manchunder.
Now, chunder actually means vomiting or throwing up. Really a very educational song for us 80s kids. A #1 hit about drinking beer and vomiting. And you know what? The iconic saxophone riff that Greg Ham played on Who Can It Be Now? That was toward the end of the song. And then their producer noticed that it was such a perfect hook. It was so catchy. He moved it to its prominent role, and I really think that helped push it to #1. It made it such a catchy song. Anyway, let's get into the interview. As we get into it, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenny Eyewear, the brand I jam every day. Right now, if you click on the info button here or link below, you can get their sunlight-activated glasses where the frames actually change from clear to colorful in the sunlight. You can design any pair of glasses to your pleasure with up to 80% off regular retail prices. Again, just click on the info button or down here to get the best deal. Check it out today. Here's Colin.
My mother and father had a music shop. So in Scotland, very magical way to grow up, surrounded by guitars and records and drums and pianos. And every Monday, you know, fresh singles would come in. One song in particular that sticks in my mind. I mean, there were many songs, but the first time I heard You Really Got Me was kind of frightening by the Kinks because it had that really kind of distorted guitar, which was very distorted for the time.
You really got me going. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing.
Incredible melody, sounded fantastic. And there were many, many songs. The Who were I used to love whenever a new Who song came in.
People try to put us to down. Talking about my generation.
The Beatles, the Kinks, the Rolling Stones, all those bands. My brother would play me Booker T and the MGs, which was another world. I was very lucky to grow up in that environment.
Speaking of the Beatles, you might be one of a few people in the world that Paul McCartney's actually washed your dishes.
Yeah, he didn't wash them very well. It was a token effort. Fed him dinner. After we finished eating dinner, he took the plates into the kitchen, started washing them under the tap, and I just looked across and thought, Paul McCartney's doing my dishes.
Your first record, Business as Usual, I've always read that the album was held back from the US for a while. And I find that so interesting because, like you said, the album, and you probably already know this, but the album spent 15 weeks consecutively at number one. You're right there with Michael Jackson, Thriller, and the likes of Purple Rain and those big albums from the 80s. But even more so, there have been about 150,000 albums that have made the charts in the rock era. You're only the third rock album besides The Police, Synchronicity, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band to have that many weeks at number one.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep, a third. I know. Put you in some select company there. I mean, it was a huge album. It was one of the first cassettes that I owned and many other people. How did the songs come for that?
The key for that was meeting Ron Streicher, the other guitar player in the band, and he opened a creative door for me, and we started to work together. So I used to write by myself most of the time, 95% of the time. But then I had this great vehicle, which was this. So Ron joined, and then Jerry came, and then Greg joined, and then John joined. So it was in the space of maybe 2 or 3 months, the band came together. So I had a vehicle to immediately play those songs, and they were we were kind of a jam band for a while. We were kind of hippie influence, and we would play Down Under, but it was like 6 minutes long, and we would play Who Can It Be Now, and it was 6 minutes long. But the songs were there, and having the band as a vehicle to play those songs was there. But the other key thing that when we played for a couple of years, but when we eventually got the record deal, Peter McKeon, who was the American record producer, he was very instrumental in taking those songs and spearheading the arrangements of them, and moving the parts around of the songs, getting the saxophone and putting up at the front of the song in Who Can It Be Now. So he returned the songs into pop songs.
It's interesting with Who Can It Be Now because it has that call and response, right? In the chorus, you sing it, and then you got the saxophone. How did that song come about?
I was in the bush, they call it the bush in southern New South Wales, with my girlfriend at the time, Linda. And we were sitting there, we built this little treehouse. We bought some land. We got 55 acres of land for $9,000 in 1977. And we just used to go there. It was very rural, very remote, no one around at all. Beautiful, beautiful coastline, southern New South Wales. And we built this little treehouse, and 4 of the stumps for the trees were actually 3 of them were actually living trees, so they were still growing. So it was like comfortable camping. So I was just sitting around with an acoustic guitar and came up with that idea of the song and sang some lyrics.
Can it be knocking at my door? Make no sound.
Who gonna be? And Linda said, "Oh, that'll be your first hit. That song. That's very catchy." So she was correct. That's how it came about. Simple. It was a simple one. Sometimes they're simple, and sometimes you gotta wrestle them to the ground. We wrote Down Under as a co-write, but we didn't really even write it together.
I come from a land.
Ron Streicher, he had the original idea for that song, which was on a little cassette tape. He used to make these really interesting little home demos, and they were always kind of very interesting. And but this one had a kind of a percussion bass. He'd filled up bottles with different levels of liquid. And that's what the start of the song was.
Right.
We kind of used that at the start of the song. But in the demo, it was just that all the way through. And it was just doing ding, 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 ding. And then there was a bass line he put on there, which was
With a slack jaw, not much to say.
Yeah.
And it just kept going, and I loved listening to it in the car. And then for a few weeks before that, I'd had this line in my head, living in the land down under. And I didn't know, I just liked the line. And then one day I was driving along in this street that I used to have some friends who lived there in Melbourne. And this thing was going along, it was going doon, and so I just think, living in the land down under. I thought, oh, that's cool. And so I was just sang it over his tape. And then the next morning I just went home and the lyrics and the chords came. And it just came like in half an hour, and that was it.
I want to ask you about another song off of that, Be Good Johnny, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
How did that come together? And was it a little wink to Johnny Be Good?
Well,
Chuck Berry?
obviously because of the title, yeah. But not the content of the song, but yeah, I mean, fantastic. I've seen him play a bunch of times. I mean, I think he's the greatest pop writer, you know. Just those songs were they just crossed everything. They crossed R&B and they crossed the blues, and it was country, and it was all those things, but they were pop songs. That's very difficult to do.
Why can't you be true? Oh, Maybelline.
Anyway, Be Good Johnny Greg and I were in rehearsals one day. We were waiting for the rest of the band to come, and he was just messing around with this idea. Good to write a song from the standpoint of like a 9-year-old kid. So that's what we did, and we wrote it before the band arrived. So again, that was pretty quick, that one.
And you even kind of sing in his voice a little bit. So after that album, of course, Cargo hits, and that was a big album as well. And one of the songs that kind of reintroduced you to a new audience was Overkill.
Think about the implications of diving into deep.
It's my favorite Men at Work song of all time. Tell me about that one. How did that come together?
Well, again, we were rehearsing. I brought the song to the band, and they were very non-committal. They didn't really. I was so excited about the song, but they were not. Well, maybe they were, but they were very completely undemonstrative about it. And I got a little despondent, to be honest. And they went to have lunch, and I just recorded it myself.
From overkill.
I think they might have gotten a little bit upset by that, but maybe not. I can't really remember. But yeah, it's a song that I think it's quite open in its interpretation, but it's got some kind of haunting quality to it that chordally it goes to some interesting places.
Only brings exasperation.
Because a certain amount of time has gone by, it does have a certain timeless quality to it.
It
that I
does.
like.
Well, a song that you wrote back in the day that kind of, I mean, it really works today as well, in the times that we live in, is It's a Mistake.
It's a mistake.
Yeah, well, I thought that was quite an innovative song, especially the video was my favorite video that we did. There was claymation in there, and it was really a cool video. And it was set in tragedy as well, because it was just after the Ash Wednesday fires in Victoria. So, I mean, we took advantage of it, but it was a deadly fire. People died, and it was extraordinarily devastating. But we drove in there and we shot when all the bush was still smouldering, you know.
We got the bad guys on the run.
Yeah, it's very influenced by Dr. Strangelove, but very real at the height of the Cold War. And, the potential is still there.
Who would have known, 30 years later that it's
Well,
still...
maybe even more so, you know.
I know, exactly.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Well, I'm really anxious to talk about Next Year People. Seems like in the album, Again, I said this before, but it really pushes forward the importance of the album as a piece of artistry. My favorite song from the album, well, If I'd Been a Better Man is one of them, but Did You Just Take the Long Way Home? I love that song.
Did you just take the long way home?
Yeah, I like that one. Sonically, I think it's the best song on the record. My friend Michael came over, and he had a new Gibson J200. He had a capo on the 3rd fret. He said, "What do you think of this?" He played the chorus, the first line of the song. I said, "That's good. What's that?" It was a very emotional song to write. You know, for me personally, it was about losing. There was a lot of things in there because I'd lost my mother. She always used to get lost at the Five Ways in Melbourne. There's a place she would be driving, and she would get to the Five Ways, and she would always go the wrong way.
You got lost at the Five Ways, took a wrong turn.
And so that was in there, but it wasn't really about her. The thing was really about a man who, in the verses, he knows that she's gone. He's kind of living in the reality of the fact that his wife has left him.
And could it be that you don't love me?
Hey, leave us a comment about Colin Hay and Men at Work and his solo music. What are your memories of these songs, of How Can It Be Now and Down Under? What do you think about the lawsuit, the Kookaburra? I hope I'm saying that right. I mean, you know, sometimes songs sound alike, but I don't think that it should have been a lawsuit. That's just my opinion. Tell us yours. What do you think below? And what do you think about Colin's new stuff? If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.